Welcome back to Beyond Global Waves. It's funny to think about how we just take wireless internet for granted these days. But way back in the mid-90s, things were very different. Today, we're diving into the story of Ricochet.
Okay.
A wireless internet service that was truly ahead of its time. Picture this, 1994 dial-up modem, busy signal.
Right.
And along comes Ricochet, offering unlimited internet for a flat rate of $30 a month.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Cellular companies were charging a fortune for, limited data.
Yeah.
But Ricochet was a completely different beast. The company behind it, Metrocom, wanted to provide affordable internet access, and they went about it in a really clever way.
So how did they do it? Cellular companies were spending billions on spectrum license,
Right.
building those giant towers.
Sure.
Did Metrocom have some secret weapon?
Well, they realized they didn't need to play the same game as the cellular giants. Instead of buying expensive licenses, they used the unlicensed radio spectrum between 900 and 28 megahertz. And forget massive towers. They used small, inconspicuous microcell radio strategically placed on existing infrastructure.
Okay.
Like streetlights about a quarter-mile apart.
So it's like they built a hidden network right under everyone's noses.
Exactly.
Using the city itself as the infrastructure.
Exactly. And it wasn't just any network. It was a unique mesh network.
Okay.
This meant the microcell radios weren't directly connected to the internet. Instead, they communicated,
Okay.
passing data packets along like a relay race until they reached their destination.
Hold on. A relay race for internet data. That's a pretty cool way to visualize it.
Yeah.
But how did the data actually get online if the radios weren't directly connected?
Okay. Think of it like, imagine those data packets zooming through the city, bouncing between those microcell radios.
Okay.
Eventually, they'd reach a wired access point. A special radio connect the internet via...
Okay.
These access points acted as gateways for the entire mesh network.
So the wired access point was like the finish line of the relay race.
Yeah.
Where the data finally gets onto the internet superhighway.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see how this all worked. But what about the user experience?
Right.
What was it like to actually use Ricochet?
Well, you needed a Ricochet modem, of course.
Right.
And it was surprisingly compact, about the size of a small cell phone, costing around $350. Keep in mind, this was the mid-90s. They really were ahead of the curve.
That's pretty impressive for the time.
Yeah.
It sounds like they put a lot of thought into making it user-friendly.
Absolutely. It had a Velcro patch for attaching to your laptop, a rechargeable battery that lasted 6 to 8 hours.
Wow.
And a simple interface with a signal strength indicator. It even plugged into your computer's serial port, just like a regular modem.
So you could ditch the dial-up modem, the phone line,
Yep.
and the ISP, all with this one little device. Did it require any special software or complicated setup?
Nope. It was designed to be super easy to use.
Yep.
The modem was compatible with standard dial-up networking protocols like P and SLIP. So setting up internet access was as simple as configuring a dial-up connection on Windows 95 or NT plug-and-play, basically.
So with Ricochet, you could just roam around the city and be connected to the internet all for a flat fee.
Yeah.
That had to be a game changer for people who were used to being tethered to a phone line.
It definitely was a glimpse into the future of wireless connectivity, but it's important to remember that this was still the early days of the internet.
Yeah.
Even though they were offering unlimited access, the speeds weren't what we're used to today.
Okay. So maybe not blazing fast,
Right.
but still a huge leap forward from dial-up.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
But it makes you wonder, if Ricochet was so innovative, why didn't it become the standard for wireless internet? What happened?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Despite all its ingenuity, Ricochet ultimately faced some significant hurdles that led to its downfall.
Well, before we get into those hurdles, let's talk about what made Ricochet unique. I mean, we already touched on the mesh network and the user-friendly modem, but what else set it apart from other technologies at the time?
One thing that really stood out was Ricochet's commitment to security. Remember, this was a time when online security was still in its infancy,
Right.
but they took it very serious. The modem used digital transmission with frequency hopping, making it really difficult to eavesdrop on the signal.
So they were scrambling your data as it hopped between those streetlight radios.
Exactly.
Making it much more secure than a traditional phone line.
Exact. They also incorporated hardware-based encryption using RSA and 256-bit RS4 algorithm,
Wow.
which were considered very strong at the time. This meant that your data was effectively encrypted as it traveled through the network, offering a level of protection that was way ahead of most other internet services back then.
Wow. They really went above and beyond to ensure their users' data was safe. It sounds like they thought of everything.
They were very forward-thinking.
But if Ricochet was so secure and user-friendly, why didn't it catch?
Well, despite its many strengths, it also had its one major challenge was the limited coverage area. Okay.
Ricochet was only available in a handful of cities, mainly because of the cost and logistics of deploying those microcell radios everywhere.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
They couldn't really compete with the nationwide coverage of cellular companies, at least not initially. It's a classic chicken and egg problem.
Right.
They needed more users to justify expanding.
Right.
But they needed wider coverage to attract more.
Exactly. It's a common challenge for any new technology trying to gain a foothold. But in Ricochet's case, it was particularly acute because of the way they built their network. And to make matters worse, internet technology was evolving rapidly. Faster technologies like DSL and cable internet started to emerge, offering significantly higher speeds.
Right.
And challenging Ricochet's value proposition.
So while Ricochet was ahead of its time,
Yeah.
it ultimately couldn't keep up with the ever-increasing demand for speed and mobility. But wasn't there also an issue with how well it performed while moving?
You're absolutely right. That was another major drawback. While it was fine for stationary use.
Right. The service would often degrade or drop completely if you were in a move. You couldn't really rely on it for true mobile productivity.
Yeah.
It was more like stay in one place and enjoy your unlimited internet. Don't even think about walking around the block.
So it was more like a portable internet connection than a truly mobile one.
Right.
That definitely limited its appeal in a world that was becoming increasingly on the go.
Right. And as faster, more versatile technologies emerged, Ricochet's limitations became more apparent.
Okay.
Ultimately, Metrocom filed for bankruptcy.
Oh.
And widespread Ricochet service came to an end.
What a fascinating story.
Yeah.
It's incredible to think about how this innovative technology existed before Wi-Fi and cellular data became ubiquitous. It truly was a pioneer in the world of wireless internet.
Absolutely. While Ricochet ultimately faded away, its legacy lives on its innovative mesh network architecture and user-centric design philosophy paved the way for seamless connectivity.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most groundbreaking ideas don't always achieve mainstream success, but they can still have a lasting impact.
Absolutely. And they can inspire future generations of innovators.
Well said.
Yeah. You know, it's a shame that Ricochet ultimately didn't succeed because it had some really groundbreaking. For example, its mesh network was incredibly robust and resilient.
Yeah, we talked about how the microcell radios communicated with each other to create this sort of web of connectivity. But what made it so robust?
Well, each microcell radio actually had a unique address that reflected its geographic location using latitude and longitude coordinates. It was like each radio had its own built-in GPS.
So it's not just randomly passing data around. It actually knows where it is and where everything else is in the network. It's pretty smart.
Exactly. This addressing system allowed the network to route data incredibly efficiently. When a data packet entered the network, each radio could figure out the best path to its destination by consulting its neighbor's address.
It's like each radio is asking, hey, do you know how to get to this address?
Yeah.
And if its neighbor doesn't know, it asks another neighbor.
Right.
And so on until the data reaches its destination.
That's a great way to put it. And the beauty of this mesh network is that it was self-healing. If one radio went down or got congested, the network could simply reroute the data through a different path.
So it's like a digital detour system for internet traffic.
Exactly.
No single point of failure. Data always finds a way to get through.
Right.
That's way more resilient than a traditional network where everything relies on a central tower.
Absolutely. And remember, all of this was happening back in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Long before mesh networks became a common concept. They were truly ahead of their time.
It's mind-blowing to think about how much ingenuity went into designing this system. But I'm still curious about the speed. We know it wasn't as fast as today's internet.
Right.
But how did they make it work with data hopping between all these radios?
Well, the radios themselves were capable of forwarding data at a decent speed for the time, around 100 bits per second. But the real challenge was ensuring that all these radios stayed in sync. And communicated effectively.
Yeah. With all those radios passing data back and forth, it seems like there'd be a lot of potential for things to get messed up.
Yeah.
How did they prevent that?
They designed a system where the radios would constantly exchange information about their neighbors and the overall network status. It's like they were always whispering to each other. Hey, I'm over here and this is what I'm...
So they were constantly monitoring each other to make sure everything was running smoothly.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like a living organism.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
This constant communication allowed the network to adapt to changes and optimize data flow, ensuring that everything stayed in sync.
Okay, so we've covered the mesh network. But what about the modem itself? We know it was user-friendly.
Yeah.
But I bet there were some cool features under the hood for the more tech-savvy users.
You bet. Metrocom actually released a very detailed manual for the modem, which was packed with information about its inner workings and advanced configurations. It was like a treasure trove for tech.
Would you imagine? What kind of things could you do with it?
One really cool feature was the ability to access a list of nearby microcell transmitters.
Oh, okay.
You could actually see their location coordinates, signal strength, and even the latency.
Wow.
Which gave you an estimate of their distance.
Whoa, that's like having X-ray vision into the network.
Yeah.
You could literally map out the location of the radios around you. That had to be a dream come true for tech-savvy users.
It was. And for those who really wanted to tinker, the manual also described a connectionless mode that allowed you to send and receive data from multiple modems simultaneously.
So you create your own little network within the larger Ricochet network. That's pretty awesome.
It was. Imagine using that feature to create a localized chat app or even share files between nearby users. It was a glimpse into the potential of peer-to-peer communication, long before things like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi Direct became common.
It's amazing how much they were able to achieve with this technology. But even with all these cool features, they still struggle to gain widespread adoption. We talked about the limited coverage area and the performance issues while moving, but were there any other factors that contributed to Ricochet's downfall?
Well, one issue was the potential for interference with other electronic devices. Remember, they were using the unlicensed radio spectrum, which meant they had to share those airwaves with other devices that operated on the same frequency.
Oh, right. So your Ricochet modem might have ended up competing with your cordless phone or your baby monitor for bandwidth.
Exactly.
That could be a problem.
Exactly. And this interference could be especially troublesome for sensitive equipment medical device, which was a real concern at the time.
So while using the unlicensed spectrum was a clever way to keep costs down, it also came with its own set of challenges. And as faster, more reliable technologies like DSL and cable internet started to emerge, it became harder for Ricochet to compete.
That's right. Ultimately, despite its many innovations, Ricochet was simply overtaken by the rapid pace of technological.
It's a reminder that even the most groundbreaking ideas can become obsolete if they don't adapt to changing landscape.
But even though Ricochet is largely forgotten today, it's important to remember its pioneer spirit. It paved the way for ubiquitous wireless connectivity take for granted.
I completely agree. It's a fascinating story of innovation, ambition, and ultimately the relentless march of technological progress.
Yeah.
So what can we learn from the story of Ricochet? What are the key takeaways that we can apply to our understanding of technology and innovation today?
Well, one important lesson is that technological innovation doesn't always guarantee success. There are many factors that can influence whether a tech takes off, including market forces, timing, and luck.
True. Sometimes the best technology doesn't win, and that's okay. But even if technology fails to achieve mainstream success, it can still leave a lasting legacy. Ricochet's influence can be seen in the way we think about wireless connectivity today, and that's something worth celebrating. I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into the fascinating world of Ricochet. It's been a real journey back in time to explore this forgotten gem of wireless innovation.
I agree. It's been a pleasure sharing this story with you. Hopefully our listeners will be inspired to learn more about the technology at the innovative way for the connected world.
You know, as we wrap up our deep dive into Ricochet, it's incredible to think about how different the internet landscape was back then.
Yeah.
It really puts things into perspective.
This does, doesn't it? Back in the mid-90s, the internet was still this new frontier, mostly used by universities and tech enthusiasts.
Yeah.
Most people were still using dial-up and had no idea what Wi-Fi or mobile internet even was.
And into that world comes Ricochet, offering unlimited wireless internet access for a flat fee. It's like they were giving people a glimpse into the future.
They were true visionaries. Ricochet was so ahead of its time, offering a level of freedom and convenience that most people couldn't even imagine back.
It makes you wonder how things might have turned out if Ricochet had managed to overcome those challenges and become more widely adopted. What do you think the internet would look like today if Ricochet had succeeded?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's an intriguing thought. I think it's safe to say that the evolution of wireless technology would have been significantly accelerated. Imagine a world where mesh networks became the standard for internet.
Wow, that's a fascinating idea. We could have seen decentralized, community-owned internet providers popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
Offering a real alternative to the big telecom companies.
Exactly. It could have democratized internet access, empowering local communities to build and manage their own network, fostering innovation and competition in ways you can only imagine.
And maybe, just maybe, we'd have a more resilient internet, one that's less susceptible to censorship and control.
That's a really interesting point. The distributed nature of mesh network apparently makes them more difficult to doubt. Perhaps we'd be having a very different conversation about internet freedom and privacy today if Ricochet.
It's amazing to think about the ripple effects that one technology can have on the world. While Ricochet may not be a household name today, It's clear that its influence extends far beyond its brief existence.
I couldn't agree more. Ricochet's story is a testament to the power of bold ideas and a reminder that even in failure, innovation leave a lasting. It's a story that deserves to be remembered and celebrated.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of Ricochet. It's been an incredible journey exploring this forgotten gem of wireless innovation. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have.
And we encourage you to continue exploring the fascinating, you never know what hidden gems, forgotten stories cover.
Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.